Is there anything like a destined husband, someone God has destined one to be with even before birth? I don't think so. No, actually, we don't see anything like that in scripture. We don't see anything like a destined husband, a soulmate, a what else? What else do you used to call those things? A destined husband, a soulmate, the person that you must marry. There's no such thing in scripture, right? Because we've seen guidelines for marriage, even from the Old Testament and even more, even in the New Testament. Guidelines for marriage in the law in the Old Testament, in Jesus' teaching in the New Testament, right? So we see that the marriage is between one man and one woman, right? Doesn't mean that there's a particular man that must marry a particular woman, but we'll get there. Marriage is between one man and one woman because Jesus came and said, for this reason, in fact, in the Old Testament, actually, for this reason, a man will leave his father and the mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one. Right? So, marriage is between one born male husband because of the world we live in, one born male husband and one born female wife, right? To enjoy themselves, or one another, to enjoy each other for the rest of their lives. As Jesus comes to tell us that divorce was not even God's plan. At the beginning, it was not so, right? And so we have guidelines for marriage in scripture, and there are things that show us from Old Testament and even New Testament that there's no such thing as it was believed then. There wasn't any indication that it was believed then that there has to be that one particular man must marry one particular woman, and has been destined so by God, that they must not marry any other person. We don't see any. So like, oh, so you now have to go and figure out who is my soulmate, who is my destined husband, who is my destined wife, who will I marry, Lord? Really? No. Should you pray about who to marry? Of course. But does that mean that from the time you were born like this, even before you were born, God has been saying, uh, how to mention it? God has been saying is that, you will marry. There's a girl in southern Nigeria, Port Harcourt to be exact, fair skinned. That's the person you will marry. No, and because we see when we look at Old Testament in Numbers, because we see scripture Numbers chapter 36, verse 6. So context, right? There was a controversy that was happening in Israel. They were going to the promised land. Moses was giving instructions, and this man Zelophehad had daughters, right? And Zelophehad died. He didn't have sons, so there was no heir. There was there was no son to inherit his properties. So they now said, oh, so they brought the matter to Moses, and Moses said, give the properties to, and the Lord actually also told Moses to, give the properties to the daughters. Right? There is no heir, so you should go to the daughters. And so the daughters took the properties. But then there was now also another issue, because going to the promised land, every tribe, there were 12 tribes of Israel, and every tribe, each of the tribes had their own territory. So they drew a map, essentially, that from year to year is where this tribe will stay, from year to year is where this tribe will stay, right? And Zelophehad would also have inheritance in real estate. So there were parts of the land or parts of the territory that would belong to Zelophehad. Now, there was not this contention because they were all women. They will marry, and if they marry people from other tribes, right, they will marry into that tribes because they were women. And so they're marrying into their tribes. Does that mean that the boundary, the real estate, the property, or the inheritance of Zelophehad within their tribe will now go to another tribe? That was the contention. Then they came to Moses again, and the Lord was like, so Numbers 36, verse 6. So this is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad. I'm reading it now, and KJV, saying, let them marry whom they think best, but they marry only within the family of their father's house. So the Lord was not saying, what you're saying is true. so that it will not be that such a case will not happen maybe in every other tribe, right? That daughters have inheritances and then people will not be the territory will be shifting, maps will just be changing because of marriage, and at the end of the day, chaos in boundaries and borders would erupt because every few years somebody is marrying into, along with inheritance, marrying into another tribe. So the law was like, when such a thing happens, let them marry whoever they wish, only marry within the tribe. And this is for the case of the daughters that are holding inheritance, right? They can marry whoever they wish, but that's not even the contention concerning inheritance. Is not the contention. The contention here is that the Lord told them that they can marry whoever they wished, right? Because the Lord didn't say, that's true. What you said is true. And I've already destined them to marry somebody from another tribe. What will we do now? Because the destined husband is not in this tribe. No. The Lord said He gave it to their um to their prerogative. Marry whoever you like. You see a fine boy, he likes you, you like him back. Marry. Marry. Alright. Marry. It's not, who's the destined husband now? You've not found him, you'll find him. Just keep looking out there, you when you see him. No, it doesn't mean that believers should just marry carelessly. Just see one fine girl on the road and say, fine girl. You wanna be married tomorrow, this place and time, bring a white, wear something whitish. Meet me there. We'll sign the papers and of course you choose with God. All right. But in this case, we see it's not necessary that the Lord is saying, I've already chosen somebody you must marry and you must marry that person. No. Instead, marry, of course, there's wisdom and tact in choosing who to spend the rest of your life with. But then, the point here is that there's not, if there was, the Lord would have hinted that, I have destined this person for daughters of Zelophehad, and he's the one they must marry, whether they are transferring tribe or not. That's the person they must marry, and that's the person. No, he said they should marry whoever they think best. And it's the same thing in the New Testament. First Corinthians 7, Apostle Paul was writing concerning marriage. In 1 Corinthians 7, verse 39, he says, a wife is bound by law as long as her husband lives. That is, once the spouse of somebody is still alive, they cannot marry another person. But if her husband dies, and he's talking about a believing wife now, somebody who is a Christian. So if the spouse is dead, the person is at liberty to marry whomever she wishes. So I read it now. So if her husband dies, she's at liberty to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. So it's similar to what happened in Numbers 36. The daughters of Zelophehad had a land issue on their hands, and the Lord was like, they can marry whoever they want to marry, just in this tribe, so that the borders will not be shifting every now and then. And then at the end of maybe a few hundred years, there's already chaos. We don't know the border of one tribe from the other because marriage has happened and because of daughters holding property and inheritance, and marriage has happened, and then there's now mix and match of inheritance and landmarks, and everything just messy. But it's going to affect a lot of tribes if that happens. So that was why the Lord told them, but he told them they can marry whoever they want, and that same whoever they want to marry, and that same thing is happening in 1 Corinthians 7. Apostle Paul is saying a believing spouse, their spouse will die, let them marry whoever they want to marry, only in the Lord. But then it is still the same idea of whomever you want to marry. So a widow sees somebody that they like and likes them back, they can marry. And if you don't like that person too, that's fine. Move on. And so there really isn't, in context of scripture, I am supposed to marry this person and this person I must marry, otherwise I will not marry. Because it's something I usually say this. I usually ask people this question. It's something I heard. I don't even remember who I heard it from. I heard it years ago, and I was like, and I was like, that actually makes sense. Because this world, a lot of things happen in this world. A lot of things happen in this world. And think about it, concerning the people who, first of all, the number of men and women on in the world are not equal. So if everybody had destined husband or wife, that's not the thing I heard the person say. But let me say this first. If everybody has destined husband and wife, and the number of male to number of female is not 1:1, it's not equal. So the people that are now overflowing on either side, who will they now marry, or they are not destined to marry? That's one question. The next one is the people who say, oh, if we say, oh, this is the person that is somebody's destined husband or wife, the person could, God forbid, but what if something happens to that person tomorrow? Does that mean that the person that they're supposed to marry will not now have destined husband? So if the person passes on, for example, God forbid, but if that happens, does that mean that the person that they were supposed to marry would not now have destined husband again? Or there could be a mistake that somebody mistakenly marries somebody's destined husband or destined wife. Does that mean that their actual destined husband is now without destined husband or destined wife now? I don't know. Do you make is what I'm saying making sense? Is it because if that is the picture we are trying to paint, it's going to be very complicated and messy. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. All right, there's no there's no such thing like that in the scripture as we see. That is the person that this person must marry. It's not like that at all in the scripture. Okay, it's not like that at all in scripture.